Are you ready to be unmessable with? Well, you are in the right place. Welcome to Be Unmessable With, the podcast where you get the inspiration, strategy, and coaching to be unmessable with, no matter what life throws at you. And now, your host, Jocelyn Herman-Saccio.
Welcome to Be Unmessable With, the podcast. I am your host, Jocelyn Herman-Saccio, and I am so excited about my guest today. His name is Oz Garcia. He is a master, an authority on healthy aging, age reversal, and fortifying the immune system. His client list includes A-list celebrities, Fortune 100 CEOs, and most recently, those dealing with COVID and post-COVID health issues. He has been doing this for more than 40 years, and he is really one of the most recognizable names in the industry. He is the author of 5 best-selling books. He's been voted twice as the best nutritionist by New York Magazine. He's been in every magazine you can imagine, every television network you can imagine. And I am proud to say for that nearly 40 years, he is a very close family friend. Welcome to the show, Oz Garcia.
Josh, thank you very much.
I'm so happy you could make the time to be with us and share some wisdom and really support people in being unmessable with their health and well-being and aging, because it's such a thing that messes with people,
No
is the whole
question.
idea. Totally. So tell us a little bit about how you ended up being so specialized in that area, just from general nutrition going to specifically to aging and reversing aging.
Everybody gets older, and at a certain point, I hit 50, and at a certain point, I hit 60, and at a certain point, I hit 70. So now I'm 73, and I'm real curious about quality of life for people that are in my age group. Certainly for just about anybody. I mean, you start aging the day that you're born, but what is it that I started to do about 40 years ago, so that I could wind up at this age and actually have an almost fully functional body where I can make a prediction in terms of where my health will likely be in about 5 years, 10 years, and so on. And that kind of technology, the way that I think about my body, the kind of mindset that I think is relevant to the concerns of life extension and not only living long, but living long well, a relatively infirm free life, is center in terms of what's on my mind these days. So if you'd ask me at 30 or 40, who's thinking about being in their 70s and in their 30s and 40s? It comes to everybody. And so you need to start cultivating different habits, different practices. There's an immense amount of, I'd say, investment going into the science of aging, what can be done in terms of many of the new startups that are out there that are so well funded by individuals that are concerned with the same subject matter as me. How do you deal with your lifespan? And like I said before, how do you deal with the quality of your life so long as you're around?
And what would you say if you look at the different decades, right? Because, we're in 2 different decades, and then my daughter is 28, and, then I've got an 18-year-old. So there's different decades throughout, and my mother, as you know, is 93, so it's what can you do at every stage? Like one thing you could do at every stage to improve the quality of your aging. Because, like you say, aging is one thing, but aging well is a whole other conversation. And, I see what's happening with my parents, and I think to myself, wow, what could I be doing now to make sure that I have the best shot at the most well aging process possible? I don't know, that was very poorly said. I'm sure you have
No,
better
actually,
language.
actually, you hit the nail right on. Depending on who you're listening to, there are certain critical pivot points. So if you listen to Peter Attia, he's telling you that you need to be fit. You need to be as fit as possible at any age, right? And so fitness becomes central to just about anything that's going to regulate the speed at which you age. And also is going to determine in large measure your health, your ability to control heart disease, diabetes, the health of your brain, which is our primary asset, our personal life, our interest in having an active sexual life, let's say. So being extremely fit is critical. I would say that being well rested. So sleep plays an incredibly important role in terms of how well we're going to do at any point. I
Yeah.
think quantifying your sleep. So I'm wearing an Aura ring,
Hmm.
and enough people know what it is. Now, an Aura ring is telling me more or less about the quality of my sleep. So it's actually keeping me honest in terms of the time that I go to sleep, what's going on during the time that I'm in bed, what happens when I wake up, so that I can make a prediction in terms of how well my day is going to go. But beyond that, I'm measuring something called heart rate variability, HRV, which has become really important at any age to find out how long you may live and what condition you may live in, right? So measuring HRV, having good quality sleep, and then of course diet. To not be aware of what good dietary habits are in this day and age is just a huge failure point in terms of what you may choose to want to do. If you're living in America, I mean, you're going to be compelled and driven to eat a lot of highly processed food. I think that unfortunately, between the East Coast and the West Coast and Miami and all the way up to Chicago, you've got these great areas where people eat terribly. And a lot of
Mm.
it's because of the control of food portholes that say, where you've got a lot of control over the amount of information that people are exposed to in terms of what they should shop for if they go to a large supermarket. So if you go to Publix, it's pretty scary, right? The food carts themselves are immense. The aisles are immense, and what you can pile on if you're going through one aisle after another is food that's designed to very much entertain the palate, but it isn't designed to rebuild aging systems within your body, to rebuild brain function, to reverse the ways that blood sugar may be damaging you, to actually build a better heart, to build a healthy microbiome. So we've got certain things that we think are really critical. You can start at any age. Get educated about food, know what it is that is empowering for you, build a better microbiome, get an adequate amount of sleep, and you got to work out just about almost every day. And that doesn't mean that you need to kill yourself working out, but you just need to be a fit human being.
Yeah, like movement is what when I work with people and they're just starting to get into some sort of an exercise regimen, it's like just move for half an hour every day. And that will, because we have such a sedentary life since COVID. It's unbelievable how much I'm sitting at a desk on Zoom or on Riverside, and it's so unhealthy. And even, my kids, they're on school online and they're in their room, and it's kind of shocking if you don't design it into your day, it's not going to happen.
That's correct. It has to become um, part of your practices, kind of like brushing your teeth, taking a shower. You got to get up at a certain time every day and have your morning routine, your practices, or your afternoon routines or your evening routines. But short of that, you're going to wind up waking up to your digital devices, and that's going to begin to drive how your day goes. You and I are from a generation where we didn't have access to mobile phones for most of our youth, right? And we do know that being exposed to this kind of device all day long can actually contribute to all sorts of problems mentally, probably age you before your time. So having less exposure, like digital detoxes, and I'm just talking about it. I don't know how people would do it. Like we just led a workshop in Costa Rica, where we had 15 men with us for a week, and they were all leaders in digital agencies, in AI, the future of coding, and so on. And they're accustomed to be on two or three devices at once all day long. So part of the exercise in terms of being together was to actually build our own wood boxes. I mean, to have guys work with a hammer, nails, saws, and build their own little boxes, nail in little locks, and these boxes where you're going to put your phone for the whole time that we were there, and watching men that are so digitally driven to go through the withdrawals, including me. So,
Amazing.
so,
Yeah.
so, so, so I'm well aware that in terms of, I would say, the lifespan of your brain, actually being able to have digital detoxes also, I'd add that too.
And would you recommend something like a daily detox period or a weekly or a monthly? Like, what would be, if you were designing a program to have people detox from their digital platforms, what would it be ideally?
Um, don't look at your phone for the first 2 hours that you're awake. That's a hard one. I mean,
Yeah.
I find myself doing it still often enough. To make sure that your phone is turned off in terms of the time that you're going to look at your phone. So for me, the cutoff is 7 p.m. no matter what, and don't have any notifications. This is really important from all the data that we're looking at in terms of mental health, in terms of not being pulled in a kind of ADD, ADHD way, so that no notification shows up in your phone whatsoever. The fact that you could stay away from your phone for the first 2 hours in the morning, that's difficult. But if you win it, you win the day. And I would say the same thing. I think if you could do it in terms of your occupation and your lifestyle, 7 p.m., 8 p.m. the latest, then you're same thing. It's a win for you. It gives
Yeah.
your brain a huge break from all this unnecessary brain clutter
Yeah.
that I think is aging us remarkably in terms of our brain capacity.
And for those of you listening, if you hear 2 hours and you just think there's no universe in which that could ever happen, try 15 minutes and build on it. For the first 15 minutes, get an alarm clock so your phone is not your alarm clock, so that the first thing you wake up to is something not digital, and you aren't immediately checking your email or your Instagram feed or whatever. Actually, spend 15 to 30 minutes doing a morning routine that doesn't involve digital devices, and then see if you can add 5 minutes, add 10 minutes, like that. So build it. You don't have to go cold turkey, so to speak. Uh, although I know with
Very
bread,
good point. Very good point.
well, although when you told me to stop eating bread 100 years ago, because I am that old, I remember it was cold turkey. However, I must say, when I'm in France, because I live part time in France now,
Yeah.
which is my dream, the food there does not impact me the way it does here. So when I eat bread in the States, it's painful. I have like a painful reaction physically. In France, I can eat bread and it is not an issue. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah,
So
the gluten content in French bread is about 50 times lower than an equivalent baguette in America.
And it's not just the bread, it's all food seems so much
Sure,
better there.
it
It just
absolutely is.
it tastes better. It's like a strawberry tastes like a strawberry. Here I eat a
Yeah.
strawberry. I'm like, why am I even eating this? It doesn't even taste like anything. It's crazy.
No, you're nailing it. That actually is true. And farming practices are very different. You got to remember that if you're buying a strawberry here, you don't know where it's coming from. It could be shipped in from Chile for all you know, right? So there's a lot of differences in terms of American food sourcing. The pipelines here, certainly in New York, blueberries are shipped in often enough also from South America. So when you're dealing with food in Europe, certainly in France, it's a lot more local. It's local variant, kind of like that. And so that's going to explain a lot in terms of why you have these failure points. Also, in terms of quality of food, what it tastes like, we no longer shop local. The movement to actually get your food locally is if you have access to farmers markets wherever you live. So on the Upper West Side, there are several that I'll shop at during the weekends downtown in Union Square, and then you're going to find local markets that are selling their blueberries or strawberries that are within 100 miles of New York City.
And that's like something that everybody that's listening, you could start doing is shopping locally. You will end up with higher quality, less processed food, and give yourself a shot at eating in a healthy way in the United States, which all odds are against you, but there are ways to do it, So we hear. So let me ask you, Oz, and we've known each other a really long time. Um, when you think about being unmessable with, which is the name of this show, and that's like my whole life is about empowering people to be unmessable with and live the
Right.
life of their dreams. What's a time in your life where you dealt with something that was so difficult that it could have taken you out? It could have taken you down for the count, which is what I call being messable with, but you were able to transcend it in a way where you emerged above it, beyond it.
Well, you and I touched on it before, and I wrote a book about it. I I'm a long distance runner, but for years I was a racer in a marathon. I'd say for about 40 years. And at one point doing extensive marathoning, like if there was one going on somewhere, I would do one once a month. And on average, running about good 6 to 15 miles per day. So I put a lot of wear and tear in my body. And I had a moment in January of 2021 to actually have my neck repaired. So from the years of running, I've done a lot of damage to my cervical bones, my lower back, my hips, and so on. We had 1 month where I could go in and get elective surgery. This was right after the lockdown ended. And unless I should have listened to my friends. So what occurred was the surgery went extremely well, and I wound up picking up COVID in the hospital. Picked it up
Mm,
from the gentleman that I shared a room with. So back then, you could test negative, yet 5 days later, you were positive. You could be asymptomatic and not show anything positive in terms of a test. So this gentleman, very well-known rugby player, flown in from England to get the same kind of surgery that I did. At that point, Delta Plus was out of control in England, throughout Europe, and it was killing people. So I knew while I was in the hospital that I needed to get out. I couldn't, I can't explain it, but I knew that something wasn't right about the fact that I had a gentleman going in and out of my room, was here from England. I thought, let me see if I can get checked out. Spent 2 days in there, went home, and I just got worse.
mm,
Started to feel terribly exhausted. The pain in my neck got worse, literally, and I thought something had gone wrong with the surgery. The doctors insisted that I stay home, that this is what recovery felt like. And finally, after not being able to get out of my bed for several days at a time, called them up, asked them if I could please come in, that I thought something was really wrong. So they said, all right, come on in now. This was on a Tuesday. And had we waited probably another day, you and I wouldn't be talking.
amazing.
I went in, and they took one look at me. They threw me up on a gurney when the surgeons saw me. They didn't even bother swabbing my nose. Threw me up on a gurney and ran a PET scan on my right leg, and I had several clots going. And at that point, they figured, okay, something's really wrong here. They took me down to the emergency room, and next thing I know is I woke up in Mount Sinai, intubated. I had an
Ah,
oxygen tank attached to me. So I must have passed out. At that point, the doctor that was overseeing me came over and asked me how I was, and it probably being really quite diplomatic, obviously. And I asked him what's going on, because I'm wearing a hospital gown. I've got an oxygen tube in my nose, and he said, "Well, you have very severe COVID pneumonia." And I said, what does that mean? He said, well, half your lungs are filled with millions of microclots, and you've got one large one that's positioned to go straight to your heart. So right now you're on blood thinners and antivirals. And in that moment, Josh, I didn't get it. I said to him, well, can you just send me home and let me quarantine? And give me antibiotics and for my pneumonia. He said, no, you've got viral pneumonia. and you may not be going home for quite a while. So that was the beginning of my hospital gulag experience, where Mount Sinai didn't have any hospital rooms left. They only had storage rooms that were reconverted. So I didn't see a human face for almost a month. Everybody had to wear hazmat suits when they came in to see me. No guests were allowed, and none of the rooms had windows, so I didn't see the outside world for that time. So I lost about 40 pounds in the first week, more or less, that I was there, and I can elaborate more. But I think the that whole experience I laid out very well in my last book, which is entitled After COVID. The worst of it occurred when I got out of the hospital. I couldn't walk out. I was wheeled out. I was taken out in a wheelchair after a month of being in Mount Sinai, having had two different individuals that I shared room with die. And I thought, I couldn't make sense of this whole experience. I thought to myself, if this is this the meaning of life? I've lived 70 years at that point. I actually spent my 70th birthday up in the hospital. If this is the meaning of life, if this is what it came down to, and I remember being home and looking in a mirror, and I was unrecognizable. I was losing my hair. I'd lost a number of my teeth while in the hospital too, as a result of the way that the virus does damage to your gums. I couldn't think straight, and all I wanted to do was sleep. I didn't have the energy to go to the bathroom on my own. All right? So I needed to have a nurse walk me. I would crawl part of the way, walk a little bit, walk a little bit back, crawl the rest of the way to my bed. I developed a perforation in my bowel wall, and thought that if I didn't know any better at that point, that my life had ended. Right? And I think in terms of how do you come back from that kind of experience, and there are many people that haven't. I know many people that died during that era that had the same virus that I had. The ferocity that I got affected with, and the fact that many people still today are considered long haulers, right? They're still suffering terribly from the effects of that massive impact on their biology and their brain. So what I wanted to do was get back to how my life was before COVID had devastated my lungs, my ability to have biological autonomy. Certainly aged me at that point. And I kind of began just by thinking appropriating the mindset that I had when I was a runner, when I was a marathoner. Right?
Okay.
So if I considered myself to be at that point and a completely unfit individual, that what would it take to go from being that out of fitness to being in good enough condition to be a marathoner again? What would I need to do? And thank God that I had the years of understanding the role of nutrition, the role of detoxification, the role of immunity, my understanding about all the different forms of peptides, supplements, amino acids that can possibly have an impact on rebuilding muscle mass, the probiotics that could rebuild back my microbiome, and what were all the nutrients that could actually build back my brain function. So I started by going on a ketogenic diet where I was eating meat 2-3 times a day, mostly vegetables, only high quality starches like yams, squashes, beans, and putting together certain kinds of IVs. Thank God that I have the understanding of how you can actually craft them. And bit by bit, I started to teach myself how to walk. So without any help, and I taught myself how to breathe all over again. So I even had a friend of mine who's a very well-known NFL player, football player, came up to New York, bought me a breathing device that he uses, and apparently other NFL players would use also. to actually expand their lung capacity. So every single day, I started to do just a little bit more to improve my health. Now, James Clear is a very well known authority in how to actually become a master over your life, over practice and habits by doing a little bit of something every day. Wrote a terrific book entitled Atomic Habits, right?
Yep.
So I listened to Atomic Habits on Audible while I was in the hospital, and I would listen to it every day a little bit more to remind me that if he could come back from having his skull smashed open with a baseball bat by accident, and then go on to be voted most valuable player in college, and then go on to become one of the world's greatest coaches and leaders in how to build new practices, I figured let me try the James Clear approach. And I should have mentioned that at the beginning that the inspiration to kind of lay out the spreadsheet, figure out how do I get back to being in the condition that I was in, was inspired in large measure by James Clear's experience. So crawling to the bathroom and then walking a foot, then crawling to the bed and then crawling 2 feet until I could finally walk was inspired by James. That pretty much led to everything else that got me back to being where I am today, 3 years, 3.5, almost 3.5 years later. Now, that was the most messed up situation I think a human being can possibly get into. The return back to a normal life, building my public life, being invited to be a moderator at Summit Worldwide, being able to write another book, to write about this whole experience and create a workbook. I think that what I've learned out of that particular experience is that there's nothing in large measure at this point that scares me. Right? Even if I had an IRS audit, I'm just so happy to wake up every morning and that I'm still here and that I'm alive. And this deep appreciation that exists these days that wasn't there, let's say, before COVID, BC. So we could elaborate on this more, but you got to remember that I went from being a complete broken body to I'm back out, I'm running, I'm working out, I'm running my company, I'm traveling all over the world teaching, and it
And you're
is,
healthy. I mean,
yeah, very
you
much
know,
so.
which is remarkable. And at 73, you look pretty freaking good if I don't say so myself. So,
Thanks to us. But again, these are there's nothing special about me. I think, like I said, that I can reference back to the time where I was at the top of my game to actually hold that mindset. I think mindfulness is really critical. I thought I was a good meditator before, but being a meditator, learning to actually spend time every day where I do mindfulness exercises, that's really critical. I spent a week in July of 2023 with Joe Dispenza. And this was a phenomenal meditative routine. You've got 2,000 students, you've got all this energy, you're meditating about 8 hours a day. And that was a complete switch in terms of also developing a more spiritual life. I think if you live in New York, you're caught up in a lot of hedonistic practices, what's often referred to as a hedonic treadmill. It's all about accumulating position, power, uh, um, excuse me, material goods, and so on. And you spend very little time in cultivating character, which is unfortunate, right?
it is, and it robs people a lot of energy, of wellness in every area of their life. And I can hear in everything that you're saying, Oz, everything you kind of drew upon to come back from that place that you were at physically, was not doing it on your own, but reaching out to people who had knowledge and even your own past knowledge of what it took to get in shape for the marathon. Okay, here you are at the bottom of a new mountain. Now, how do you get up the next step and the next step, not to the top, but what's the next step and the next step and the next step. And I love that because I think so many times people get messed with by the thought of how am I going to get back to where I was right now? Or they have a baby and then they're like, oh my God, I got to get pre-baby. Or, people they retire and they're wondering why they're not inspired like they were when they first started their company. So comparing yourself to a past version of yourself, I think is one of the things that really does mess with you. But being able to be where you are and take the next step and the next step towards your new vision
Oh,
of
completely.
what that would look like is powerful.
Yeah, I knew that what I wanted at that point, my thinking was I want to be the way that I was. I couldn't predict that I would become something more, I don't want to say different, more authentic, right? A more authentic human being. And I think that the value systems that rolled out of that period of time, where for quite a while I was alone, this is interesting. I've often tried to figure out what that experience was like how could I talk about it? And I was listening to a very well-known writer being interviewed. His name is Salman Rushdie. Now, Salman Rushdie, as you know, was under a fatwa from the Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran to be killed for having written a really quite remarkable book at that time. Um, that in that part of Islam they took it really quite personally, and they wanted Rushdie dead. So for about 20 years he hid out. Finally, all of that was rescinded, and he went on to live a very public life. Number of years ago, he gave a lecture in upstate New York in an audience in front of 500 people, and he was attacked. This is very well known what occurred. He was knifed, and he was almost knifed to death. He was knifed in the eye. He lost his right eye. And so he was interviewed on NPR recently. And I remember I was cooking dinner and I'm listening to him in the background. And all of a sudden I had to put everything down so I could listen to him and his experience of what he went through. So the interviewer asked him, what were you experiencing when you were being attacked? Were you really anxious? Were you scared? Were you afraid? He said, actually, no. He said, when I was lying there on the ground in front of 500 people, I was lonelier than I could ever explain. It was the loneliest experience of my life. I was bleeding out on the floor. That's what I lived through. The
Mm.
loneliest experience that a human being could go through. So to be back in the world, to be back among the living, to be back and asking for support, to not be a know-it-all, that to your point, that we live in relationship, and relationship is everything, right? And to know when asking for support is the most appropriate thing in the world.
And it sounds like being connected to your gratitude that emerged from that whole episode, I'll call episode in your life. Being able to grab onto that and strengthen it. So I hear a couple things from what you're saying. Before we're talking about, oh yes, okay, be aware of the food and make sure you sleep and make sure you exercise, which are somewhat basic, but a different level, like from a non-dual space of being connected to your spirituality might be a little trite. That's not really the word I'm looking
Yeah,
for.
well, actually, you're right. You are you you would move. Let me make it about me for a minute. Um, I had to move from being somewhat agnostic to understanding that there's something really quite divine. You can't go around and say this to most of your friends, but once I did Dispenza, I knew that there is something really quite divine, and that I can work in terms of my meditative practices to go there. All right.
Yeah. And that's something that, a lot of people never tap into. And, sometimes people do yoga and they meditate, but it's like a thing. It's not really what it is. It's a thing to do, kind
Yeah.
of like whatever. But I think it's really profound. I mean, without getting too significant about it, um, that you connected to that at 70 or 72 and have found so much richness from it. Makes me happy, makes me want to cry just because, I love you, but also, I can really hear what's missing in so many people's lives is that connection, and when you say feeling the loneliest you ever felt, it's like, well, what are you connected to? Are you connected to your goals, like being driven to accomplish this or that? Or are you connected to the people in your life? Are you connected to your belief? Are you connected to your oneness? Are you connected to your gratitude? And there's a real opportunity for those of you listening, if you are on that treadmill, as we referenced a little bit earlier, what's really important, what really matters to you,
Sure.
and what can you do to fulfill on that? Because at the end of the day, you can't take it with you,
No, you can't.
whatever it is we're
That's
accumulating,
right.
right? Yeah, so that's very beautiful. And what are you working on now? What's like the next thing for you?
I've got a couple of book projects in my head. One of them, I wanted to make the whole field of lifespan and life extension a bit more fun. So the next book will be entitled "How to Be a Rockstar at 120." The first 10 things you need to start doing now. And I coming from a very serious point of view about it, certainly before COVID, and not that I didn't have a sense of humor. I mean, I think I've always had a good one, regardless. But to lighten up the field, that you have so many biochem companies that are in the space, the amount of technical jargon, medical jargon around the whole subject matter, and what I want to do is make lifespanning a bit more democratic. So towards that, much of what I lecture about now, what I'm talking about, what's on my mind, and what I'll be writing about will pretty much about, if you stick around long enough, how it can be as meaningful for you as it is for me at this point.
That's beautiful. As you know, my dad is 91 this year, and
Unbelievable.
he's got a 10-year plan.
Wow.
So, and he's just finishing his memoir. He's going to self-publish. So, I mean, and he's painting, like Kraz is painting behind me, but it's, a lot of, and you might remember my grandfather lived till 105,
Sure.
but it's so much mindset. And yes, the physical, absolutely.
Yeah.
You need the body to be able to, you need the piece to play the game with. So being fit is so important, but mindset is so important as you get older. It's what's one thing you could just leave people with. It's like, this, if you just do this, it will improve your aging or
I,
reverse your aging, even better.
I would say become a meditator, right? Get the waking up ad, get calm.
Insight timer or
Yeah, it's
whatever.
anything. Like start to get your thinking in order. Try to manage your default mode in your head, because that's going to actually allow you to do much of what you need to do for your body. So without mindfulness, you're just another automaton trying to figure out, do I do a cold plunge? Do I do a vitamin C IV? What are the supplements that are using? And you're kind of doing life extension by the numbers. You got to do it in large measure by I'd say having the values, the character building aspects of what you and I have been talking about right now, Joss.
I love it. I love it. I'm so happy that you took the time to be with us, and maybe we'll do a follow up once you get that book out so
I
we
love
can,
it.
yeah, we can talk about what you ended up writing about. Very exciting. And, for those of you listening, if something resonated with you, I can't imagine you were listening and didn't get value. But if you got value, if something resonated with you, just rate and review the episode. Share the episode with anyone in your life who's aging. That's called everyone who is alive. So, really share it with people, because there's so many jewels in this episode of what people can actually take action on, not just think about, but actually take action on to impact their real health, their real well being, mentally, physically, the whole world of it. So, thank you for being with us. And thank you, Oz. And we'll see you on the next episode of
Thanks,
Be
Joss.
Unmessable with.
Be well, sweetie.
Mhm. Thank you again for joining us in this episode of Be Unmessable with the podcast. And I never take for granted that you spend some time with me during your day. And I always want to make sure that you walk away with value. So if you are somebody who has ever dealt with burnout or overwhelm, I have a gift for you. If you click below in the show notes, you can get this 1 hour free workshop led by myself and Dr. Sandra Hardy, who is a specialist on burnout, and you can get some strategies for dealing with burnout and overwhelm and disappearing both of them. So take advantage of this gift and let me know what you discover out of participating in it. Thanks again.